we're going to do, we're going to start a new chapter, chapter 9, and we're going to be working on transformation, vectors and matrices, and symmetry. So this chapter isn't real difficult, but it can be a little tricky with a lot of the vocabulary. So just keep an eye on the vocabulary as we go. The first thing that we're going to look at is section 9.1. We're going to translate figures and use vectors. The first definition we're going to look at is its transformation. And what that is changing the position and shape or size of a figure. An example would be if I flip the figure, or if I slide the figure, I turn the figure, or I change its size. Anytime I do that, that's called a transformation. The next vocabulary word is pre-image. Pre-image is the original figure, and then an image is the transformed figure. So the main idea behind this is think of the word pre being before. So the pre-image always comes before the image. The next vocabulary word we're going to look at is an isometry. Now this one you probably want to star or circle. You're going to see that on your test. It's a transformation, so I'm changing something with the figure, but the original figure and its image are congruent. So I'm not going to make it bigger or smaller, but I am going to change its position of some sort. And then finally, prime notation. It's used to identify image points. And so what that means is a figure like this. You're going to notice that the first figure that we're looking at is A, B, C, D, and that is considered the pre-image. And then it turns into a new image, and it looks like this one was flipped. It turns into A prime, B prime, C prime, D prime, and I call it the image. Now you can go, well, what is prime? What does that mean? If I take a close look at these, you're going to notice that they have a little, it looks like a 1, and it kind of looks like a exponent, but really it depicts the figure as prime. It tells you that rather than having A, I'm moving to the new figure, so you know it's the newer figure because of that prime. Let's go on and let's look at some of these more definitions and then a few examples. So translation is the slide of an object, and that's the key part. It's a slide of an object, and it moves the points of the object. It's the same distance, the same direction. It's an isometry, so those figures will be congruent. And some students get kind of confused with this. If you think of slide has SL in it and translation has SL in it, that might help you to remember that all the translation is it's a slide. Another vocabulary word that you're going to learn is vector. It has an initial start and a terminal point, which is the end. And you'll see that more as we get going. It just kind of tells you where to move your objects. And then component form for vectors. It's where X describes how far to move left or right and Y describes how far to move it up or down. And the main idea is that it's the directions of how to move this point. Now you're going to notice with these, they're a little bit different in that you've got these little symbols here that look like little carrots. You're going to notice you have a comma in between. So the X value tells which way to move it left or right. If it's positive, you move it to the right. If it's negative, you move it to the left. And then the Y value tells you to move it up or down. So if it's positive, you move up. If it's negative, you move down. And you're going to see it, and when you see it, you're going to be like, well, that makes sense. Let's keep going and look at this example. You're going to notice that I have an ordered pair. So my ordered pair for A is -2, 3, and B is 3, -1. And so when we look at vectors, what we're doing is we're looking at, you'll notice down here, this is 5. And so when I went from the -2 to the 3 right here, you're going to notice that I added 5. And then if I take the look at the 3 here and I go to the -1 right here, I subtracted 2. I'm sorry, that's a positive 1. That's positive 1. That's a -2. So I took away 2, and that's how I get the -2 here. So this is considered component form. And then if they talk about the rule of the translation, you'll notice that we use parentheses, and you do an x plus 5 because I added 5, and a y minus 2 because I subtracted 2. All right, let's keep going. It's going to ask me to use the vector 3, 1 to translate the shape. It says to show your work and use prime notation to label it. So what we're going to do first of all is I'm going to take this shape and I'm going to label it. So I'm going to call this A, I'm going to call this B, and I'm going to call this C. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just what I'm going to label it. And then I'm going to come off to the side and I'm going to go, okay, my A is 2, 2. My B is 5, 5. And then my C is 4, -4. And then it asks me to move it according to that vector. And you'll notice that that direction is down here. It's 3, 1. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to do a little arrow and I'm going to put 3, 1. And you'll notice that it's not a parenthesis. It's more of a caret because it tells you how to move it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these ordered pairs to help me because it's a lot easier when you use ordered pairs. So A prime then would be, I'm going to grab my 2, I'm going to add a 3, and I end up with 5. And then I'm going to take my 2 and I'm going to add 1 and I end up with 3. And then I'm going to go to B prime. B prime, I'm going to take 5, I'm going to add 3 and I end up with 8. And then I'm going to take 5, I'm going to add 1 and I'm going to get 6. Now I'm going to go to C prime. I'm going to take 4, I'm going to add 3 and I get 7. And then I'm going to take -4 and I'm going to add 1 and I end up with -3. So really I find that this is the best way and the easiest way to make these translations. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take those ordered pairs and we're going to graph them. So A is 5, 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up 3. Here's A prime. B prime is 8, 6. So here's B prime. And then C is 7, -3, which is here. Label it C prime. And then I've got my new figure. Now you're going to notice that that shape that we started with and the shape that I have right now, there is the same size. It's the same shape, so it shouldn't have changed. If it does, you know you did something wrong. And then what I do on my final figure is I go ahead and I shade it in. So some students will shade it in with their pencil or they'll shade it in with their highlighter. And what's nice about doing it this way is I've got my final figure shaded in, and then I also have my ordered pairs highlighted. So it's nice and neat, and it's really easy to read. Okay, let's move on to the next problem. You're going to notice that we're going from point A, which is here, to point B, which is here. And we know that because you're going to notice that on B, there's a little arrow, which means I'm taking A and I'm going to B. So my A, take a look at the ordered pairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's -5, comma, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And my B is right there. It's 0, 4. Okay, so what the problem is asking me to do, it says to name the vector and write its component form. And so to be able to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to take the arrow A to B, and we start with A and then we go to B. Okay, and what we did is we got -5, which is here, and it went to 0. So what happened was is I added 5. So I'm going to put a 5 here and then put a comma. And then I'm going to look at the 6 and I went to the 4. And so I subtracted 2. So I'm going to go -2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the next one. So I'm going to look at C. So this C is 1, -2. And D is 3, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to do CD because that's what I start with. It's kind of like a sunshine ray. And I'm going to do my arrow. And I'm going to take 1 and I'm going to go to 3. And so what I did was I subtracted. And I subtracted 2. So I'm going to go 2, comma, and then -2 to 5 is 7. And then finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to EF. And E, if I take a look at that ordered pair, it's -3, comma, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, -6. And F is -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it looks like. And it's -2. Oh, it looks like 6, not. Looks like that's a 6. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at what did I do to the 6 to make the -3. And that's, I'm sorry, that's a -6. So I'm going -3 to -6. So I move to -3. And then I'm going from -6 to -2, and I am adding 4. So this is a 4. Okay. So what I did was I named the vector, which is what I did, and I wrote, now I need to write its component form. So to write its component form, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this again, and I'm going to take a look at what did I do on these to go from the one to the other. And so you're going to notice that the main idea when I went from A to B, okay, I added 5. And when I went from A to B, I went 5 with my X, and I did -2 with my Y. And then from C to D, I went from 2, and then with my X, and then my Y, I went up 7. And for EF, I went -3 to the left, and then I went up 4. And so this would be naming the vector and then doing the component form. Now, if I come down here, it says you're given something like this, A and A prime. And what it's asking you to do is it says, what is the vector? So again, how you do this is you've got your carets here. I'm going to take a look at your 1 and your 4. And what I did was I added 3. So I'm going to make this a 3. And then I'm looking at -3 to 0, and I added 3. So this vector ends up being 3, 3. So really all you're doing is taking a look at your ordered pairs and go, okay, what did I do to the X and what did I do to the Y? And then you've got your answer. All right, let's move on to the next problem. And what we're going to do with this one is we're going to look at a word called composition. It's any two transformations in which the second transformation is done right after the first one. So what we're going to do is we're going to move a triangle and then we're going to move it again. So first we're going to take this triangle here and we're going to do the ordered pairs. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to call this, I'm going to make it smaller. I'm going to call this A, I'm going to call this B, and I'm going to call this C. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come off to the side here and I'm going to go, okay, A is, and I'm going to go -3 up 4. So -3, 4. My B is 0, -2, or I'm sorry, -2, 0. And then my C, I'm going to make -2, -3. Like that. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this vector that they have down here and I'm going to move it to -1. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to do my arrow. I'm going to go 2, -1. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and do my ordered pairs. So I've got A prime. I'm going to take the -3 and I'm going to add 2. So I end up with -1. And then 4 and subtract 1, and that gives me 3. Then I'm going to do B prime. I'm going to take the -2, I'm going to add 2, and I get 0. And then I take 0 and subtract 1, and I get -1. And then I'm going to take my C prime, and I'm going to go -2 plus 2 is 0. And then I'm going to take -3, and I'm going to subtract 1, and I get -4. And you're going to notice that it goes pretty quickly when I do it this way. Oh, I'm sorry. I made another mistake. My bad. This number right here, that's a 2. That's not a -2. There we go. And so then when I add my 2, this ends up being 4. Sorry about that. Okay, so I've got my new shape now, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to graph it. So I've got -1, 3, which is right here, and this is A prime, and then I've got B, which is 4, -1, which is my B prime, and then my C is 0, -4, C prime, and then I'm going to go ahead and connect my points. And you're going to notice my shape didn't change at all. All it did was move. Now what we're going to do, because this is that special one, which is a composition, we're going to move it again. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to find out what is my vector. My vector is -3, 0. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do my -3, 0, and I'm going to go after the red. So I'm going to take my A prime and I'm going to make this new shape A double prime. So I've got -1, subtract 3, I get -4. I've got 3 plus 0, which is 3. B double prime, I'm going to take my 4 and I'm going to subtract 3. So I get 1. I'm going to take -1, add 0, I get -1. C double prime, I'm going to take 0 and I'm going to add 3, -3, so I get -3. And then I'm going to take my -4 and I'm going to add 0 and I get -4. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these and I'm going to graph them. I'm going to graph them back on this graph. So I'm going to take -4, 3, so -4, 3. So this is A double prime. I'm going to take 1, -1. So this is B double prime. And then C is -3, -4, which is right here, and that's C double prime. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, connect my points, and then I'm going to take my highlighter and I'm going to shade in my final figure. And you can notice that it can get kind of confusing when you're graphing. So really, when you use your ordered pairs, like I did right here, it makes it so much easier because you're working with the numbers and then you're just putting it on your graph. Okay, so then what it says is, what could the composition be instead? What that means is if I took a look at my black points, my A, which is negative 3, 4, and I move to my green, which is negative 4, 3. What could I say this thing is? Rather than going from the black to the red to the green, what could I do to get rid of the red and just go from the black to the green? And so if I take a look at negative 3 to negative 4, I just subtract 1. And if I went from 4 to negative 3, I'd subtract 1 also. And so what that means is if I come down here, I would do my caret and I would go negative 1 comma negative 1 and I do another caret, and there's my composition vector, and that's what it would be instead. And what you could do is you could go back up into your ordered pairs and go, okay, what about my B? Does that work for my B? If I go from the black 2 to the green 1, if I go from here to here, I subtract 1. If I go from 0 to negative 1, I subtract 1. If I go from negative 2 to negative 3, I subtract 1. If I go from negative 3 to negative 4, I subtract 1. And so you're going to see that this vector that I created is correct. All right, that's it for today. Again, make sure that when you do your assignment, you're checking your answers as you go, just to make sure that your ordered pairs are correct, making sure that you write your vector the way you need to. And then if you have any questions, please let me know.